Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Spann Report podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Spann, and this is episode number 88 of the report. Yeah, man, right back at it. Right back at it. Just coming off of doing the Art of Disagreement with the homie Mr. Gates. We did a volume 4 on that. We talked about the negative influence or the perceived negative influence that hip hop may have on our youth. And it was a real good discussion that me and Mr. Gates had last night. Be sure to check out that episode. Watch that episode if possible on the SpannReport.com or on YouTube. Go ahead and check that out. And especially go to the SpannReport.com. Go and vote in the polls on whether or not you believe that hip hop has a negative or positive influence, or whether or not you really believe that hip hop has a negative influence on our youth. So go ahead and head over to the SpannReport.com and check that out and vote in that poll. Let us know and check out that episode as well, man. I think it was a really good discussion to be had there. So and thanks again to the homie Mr. Gates for coming on the show once again for us to have yet another Art of Disagreement debate, man. Real talk. Those have become pretty popular among some of the listeners, man. So definitely go ahead and check that out, man. But yeah, man, this is episode 88, and very seldom do I get right back on the mic and do an episode after after having an episode done last night. But yeah, man, it's been a couple things that have happened throughout the week that I kind of wanted to speak to. I wanted to give my voice to. Yeah, and there's some tragic shit, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna get into it a little bit later in the show. But of course, I gotta let you guys know how to get in touch with me here at the Spann Report podcast to let your voice be heard. You can hit me up at the hotline at area code 313-288-0485. There's area code 313-288-0485. Leave me those voicemail messages. I will play those messages on the show, and of course, I will respond in kind. You can also email the show here. Coming up. There you go. Feedback at thespannreport.com. That's feedback at thespannreport.com. Leave me those email messages and I will read those emails. And of course, I will reply to those emails live here on the show. You can also chop it up with your man on Twitter and Instagram. My name on both of those platforms, of course, is Mr._Spann. Also, you can go on like the Facebook fan page, Mr. Spann fan page on Facebook. Go ahead and like the fan page. You'll be alerted when the new episodes of the Spann Report are going to come out. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel and be alerted when the new episodes of the Spann Report are going live or when those videos are available. So go ahead and like the Mr. Spann fan page. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram, and we can chop it up throughout the week that way. Also, leave me an iTunes and or Stitcher review. Leave an iTunes and or Stitcher review, preferably 5 stars. I will read those 5-star reviews here on the show, and it's a way to give back to the show, especially for some of you guys who've been listening for quite some time. You've been listening every week. You don't have to pay any money. You don't have to send me any money, but a 5-star review would be very much appreciated. So go ahead and leave a 5-star review. Let other people know that you're enjoying the show, what you enjoy about this show, and help the word grow, help the show grow by leaving that 5-star review, and it'd be very, very much appreciated. And of course, for all of your Spann Report needs, go to the SpannReport.com. All podcasts are available there. Each and every episode of the Spann Report podcast is available at the SpannReport.co. Associated are available there. All of the live SpannReport.com. It's your one-stop shop everything Spann Report. And yeah, man, do like I said, me and Mr. got a disagreement show last night, and it was really good. Hope you guys who did watch live enjoyed it, and for those of you who are going to listen to it post recording, go ahead, listen to that, and go ahead. I wanted to just kind of get right on top of some of these things and let, you know, I guess give my perspective, because I really feel like, you know, these things need to be spoken to. And I know a lot of people are speaking to them. I just feel like it's my turn to do it, right? But before I get into that, man, I had a couple random thoughts. And I don't, I know like the latter part of this show may get pretty somber, right? So I don't want to like, I don't want to just start off the show somber as shit and everything else, but it was a couple random thoughts that I had, and one of the things that like one of the things I noticed, right? Like, are any of you guys familiar with the show Tiny House Hunters, right? I think it comes on HGTV, and it's like a spinoff of the House Hunters, House Hunters show that also comes on, and then they have International House Hunters where they're showing people who are going out, they're looking to buy their first home, or they're looking to buy an additional home or whatever, and they make it look so easy, right? They make it look as if, okay, we got these 3 houses we gonna pick from. We just got to figure out which one of these 3 houses, we want and everything else, right? And so they've made a spinoff of that show, and it's called Tiny House Hunters. And these tiny house hunters, supposedly there's a trend in America that's going on where people are searching for the tiniest of homes to live in, right? Like basically rooms big enough to or homes big enough to only be maybe big enough for like I want to say maybe a hotel room, something like that. Not very big at all, right? And so one of the things that I guess like was irritating my soul, just irritating my soul about this show was the fact that these people were looking for a tiny home, but they were so worried about how much space that they were going to have, right? There was this one episode I was watching. It was this older woman. She lived alone with her dog, and I think it may have been somewhere in Hawaii somewhere. And they showed this woman a house where like it had a beautiful deck, had an outside grill and stove and things like that. But the inside, it didn't necessarily lend itself to having the most privacy, right? Like she was worried about storage space. Like she's like, there's not really a whole lot of places to keep my stuff and everything else. And, one of the things that I found odd was, if you're really worried about having enough room, wouldn't buying a tiny home be counterproductive? Wouldn't that be counterintuitive to what you say you want? And that was the thing that I thought was so interesting about this show, was that like all of these people are trying their damnedest to live in the smallest space as possible, but at the same time they're complaining about the amount of spaces they got in these homes. Like, okay, we got to make this as efficient as possible. We got to make all of these square feet work and be really efficient, and everything else is like, but well, they have to walk through our bedroom to get to our bathroom. We can't, like, we don't have any privacy here. Like everything's all in one room. Is like, well, you bought a tiny home. What the fuck were you expecting? Your bedroom, like there was another couple that was on there, man. It was the lady was 5'6" or something like that. And she was searching for a tiny home, and she was asking her boyfriend about, how he felt about the house. He's like, I could barely fit in here just standing. And even with the bedroom, because it's really not a bedroom, there's a loft that just has a bed there. And, he's like, I can't fit in here, So it's just one of those things, man. It's like, are people really they're so far gone in wanting to be different that they'll do something counterintuitive to seem intuitive? If that makes any sense. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I was watching that show, man. And like, as I'm watching, I was just getting more and more irritated with the fact that I can't believe this shit. Like just buy a regular size home already. If you got to be worried about where you're going to keep your shit, and if there's enough room in the house for you and your dog, then you might just need to buy a regular size house. And at the prices that some of these houses were selling for, like some of these really tiny homes, like at $90,000, you can get a really nice house in Detroit right now. I know a lot of folks ain't really like clamoring, chomping at the bit to buy them a house in Detroit. But I'm just saying, for $90,000, you spending this amount of money for this tiny ass house where you're worried about how much space you're going to have, and you're worried about your privacy, and you're worried about, having enough room for even guests coming over, then it just seems counterintuitive to even go about buying this home. But this is supposedly the new thing, right? This is what people are doing. We're buying these tiny homes. And yeah, that was one of the things that kind of caught my eye this week that I thought was pretty odd. But it's a show, man, and it's been going on for maybe 2 seasons, and they may continue. But yeah, I saw it. The very first time I saw that was when I was down in New Orleans for my wedding, and then me and my wife, who were watching it earlier Friday evening. So yeah, man, it was that's crazy. That's crazy, man. Another thing too that I wanted to kind of talk about was the Pope. The Pope was here in the United States last week. He toured Washington, D.C. He went to Philadelphia. A lot of people were, they're really latching on to this Pope. They like his message of inclusion to some degree. He seems to be much more of a progressive Pope than popes before him. When they talk about, his acceptance of divorce for a certain amount of time, when he talks about forgiveness for abortion for a certain amount of time. And one of the things that I found interesting, though, like especially for those who are a bit religious, who might not necessarily be Catholic, right? You start seeing memes pop up, and again, like the memes are just a thing, but you start seeing these memes pop up with these one-to-one comparisons with what some would call prosperity preachers or hustle preachers or whatever, and the Pope, right? And so one of the more popular memes that I saw going around was a picture of the Pope getting out of a Fiat. And another picture on the bottom with I'm not sure exactly what kind of Mercedes Benz this was, right? But the person purported to be driving the Mercedes was Creflo Dollar, right? And the odd thing about it was, he was like, well, it was like trying to juxtapose the Pope riding around in the Fiat and Creflo Dollar riding around in this, $100,000 Mercedes Benz supercar, right? The odd thing was that in the meme, it wasn't Creflo Dollar in the car. It was Kanye. It was Kanye in the car, man. And nobody even, like, it was funny to see this meme going around and going around. Nobody even looked and was like, hey, man, that's not even Creflo, right? And, the one-to-one comparisons are a little funny because, take for instance the Pope. Even if he was riding the Fiat, do you really believe that the Pope's Fiat is only worth $20,000, or that particular Fiat only cost $20,000? When you think about the fact that the Pope is one of the most, you can say one of the most revered people in the world. He's the head of a church that has over 1 billion members in it. A lot of people see him as the vicar of Christ, and they see him as a holy figure, right? A very holy figure. The Pope rides around in a Pope mobile with bulletproof glass, right? You don't think that Fiat wasn't fortified? You don't think that the Pope didn't? They even talked about the Pope having more security in Washington, D.C. and in Philadelphia than what the president necessarily, gets sometimes. Right, only cost $20,000. No, you kind of being, that's being disingenuous, right? And then, like, of course, there was the Pope. He rode, he rides commercial or whatever, and all of these things to basically kind of like shame these prosperity preachers. Now I get it. I think hustler. I think Long is a hustler. I think Joel Osteen to a large degree. I think a lot of them are hustlers, and they got a lot of these people, these poor people, giving them money to live their dream. But while these other people are aspiring to be like them, I think, that's deplorable. But at the same time, let's not get it screwed up in the fact that, the Pope has an entire city in Italy, and it's a sovereign nation in Italy, right? You go to Vatican City. The Vatican is its own thing. It has its own bank. It has its own everything. It's a self-sustaining city, right? It's a self-sustaining state, pretty much. It's its own state within the state. So to compare the Pope with the likes of a Creflo Dollar, who would like a $65 million plane, the Pope could have a $65 million plane. And no one would make really much of a fuss about it. We didn't hear much about it, but the Pope could have a $65 million plane. No one would say much about it. And I get it. The Pope has shamed some of the cardinals. I remember there was a cardinal. I don't exactly remember what city it was in, but there was a cardinal where he was living extravagantly in the church quarters and everything, and he had like gold, everything. He was living like a king in this particular place, and the Pope admonished and removed him from that position. And so we get it, like the Pope has a sort of everyman appeal. But I think the one-to-one comparisons when it came to the prosperity preachers were a bit disingenuous to a certain degree. And I know y'all trying to get this message out, like these preachers are hustlers, but I don't think that's a message that nobody hasn't gotten already, right? I think everybody kind of knows that Creflo Dollar, Eddie Long, and all of these other guys are pretty much hustle preachers. So yeah, man, it was interesting to have the Pope here and to see that, right? But another thing too that was interesting was the fact that there was a lot of people that lean left politically, who were kind of embracing the Pope. They was talking about the Pope being a man of the people, the Pope being more open to the environment in which a lot of people are living in, being more acceptable, making the church more open, right? And so we got word that the Pope was we got word that the Pope had supposedly met with Kim Davis. Now we know that Kim Davis is the Kentucky clerk, county clerk. She was a Kentucky county clerk who refuses to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. She's gone to jail for her refusal to issue same-sex licenses marriage licenses to same-sex couples. And to this day, she still has yet to issue a marriage license to a same-sex couple, even after being released. And so her lawyers let it be known that, she met with the Pope while he was in Washington, D.C. And I remember when I first heard it, I thought it was some bullshit. I'm not going to even lie. I tweeted it out. I Facebooked it. I'm like, this is some bullshit, man. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. But lo and behold, that shit did, right? So here's Kim Davis speaking about, I think it was on ABC News. ABC News had the story about Kim Davis meeting with the Pope, and here's what she got from it.
Now to that secret meeting between Kim Davis and Pope Francis, the Kentucky county clerk who refuses to license same-sex marriage says the meeting happened in Washington last week, and this morning she's talking about it for the first time. ABC's Paula Ferris here with that story. Good morning, Paula.
Hey, good morning, George. Kim Davis told me this was always about her religious liberty and her conscience, and she's apparently got Pope Francis in her corner. We're told the Vatican reached out to her several weeks back, arranged this secret meeting with her, and until now, they've kept it under wraps.
With enthusiastic crowds lining the streets from New York to D.C., the Pope seemed to strike just the right note with Americans on his visit. But now, this morning, reports of a secret meeting with Kim Davis, the county clerk in Kentucky, who defied a court order to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
It was really very humbling to even think that he would want to, meet me or know me.
She says she and her husband met the Pope during the Washington leg of his trip after receiving a surprise phone call from a Vatican official.
I put my hand out and he reached and he grabbed it, and I hugged him and he hugged me, and he said, "Thank you for your courage."
After being jailed for 6 days, Davis is now back at work, but still not issuing any marriage licenses, a stance Pope Francis voiced his support for during a press conference on his flight back to Rome.
Do you support those kinds of claims of religious liberty?
Telling ABC's Terry Moran, conscientious objection is a human right, even for government officials.
He told me before he left, he said, "Stay strong." That was a great encouragement. Just knowing that the Pope is on track, with what we're doing and agreeing, kind of validates everything.
According to Davis and her lawyer, Vatican officials stayed mum on the meeting because they didn't want the Pope's visit to be focused on Kim Davis. Davis saying the Pope left her with a rosary and a renewed commitment to her cause.
I've weighed the cost, and I'm prepared to do whatever it takes.
And Kim Davis plans on giving that rosary to her parents, who are Catholic. Of course, she's not. At this point, the Vatican is not confirming or denying this meeting took place, but Kim's counsel tells us we can expect to see photos of the meeting at some point. Lara, this Pope is not shying away from controversy. This is the clearest example yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Paula.
All right. Now, the screwy thing here is, when we talked about the Pope being seen as a more progressive Pope, making the church more open to those of non-traditional religious lifestyles or views, or just period, just having a more open and inclusive church. And then you have the Pope secretly meeting with Kim Davis, right? And a lot of people was just like, why the fuck would he do that? Right. And, you know, it was funny because at first the Vatican was not necessarily confirming that this had been, you know, that this meeting had even took place. It was Kim Davis's lawyers who put that news out that they were able to meet the Pope during his Washington, D.C. leg of his trip to the United States. But, you know, even as Kim Davis goes on and says that the Pope is agreeing and he validates pretty much everything I've done and everything, you know, the Vatican has come back. And after they confirmed that, yes, indeed, that they did meet with Kim Davis, they aren't necessarily putting their stamp of approval on what it was Kim Davis has been doing. So here's another clip of the Vatican speaking back.
The Vatican wants to pump the brakes on stories about the Pope's meeting with embattled Kentucky clerk Kim Davis. In a statement, a Vatican spokesperson said Pope Francis met with several dozen persons. Such brief greetings occur on all papal visits and are due to the Pope's characteristic kindness and availability. Sounds like they don't quite want to jump into the U.S. same-sex marriage debate, despite Davis's interpretation of the meeting.
It was really very humbling to even think that he would want to, you know, meet me or know me.
At the meeting in the Vatican's embassy in D.C., Davis and her lawyers say the Pope told her to stay strong and thanked her for her courage. But the Vatican statement made sure to clarify that the meeting wasn't an endorsement and said the Pope did not enter into the details of the situation of Mrs. Davis. For Newsy, I'm Kate Grumke.
All right. So the church is saying that they aren't endorsing anything that Kim Davis did, no matter what Kim Davis interprets that meeting to be, right? But it still puts you in a weird sort of position, even though you think that, you know, the Pope is a progressive Pope and everything else. For the people who aren't religious, this is just another way of saying, well, you know, they kind of the church talking out of both sides of its mouth. None of us were privy to that meeting. None of us really know what happened in that meeting. It's just strange that the Pope would meet with someone like a Kim Davis, who for the last few weeks has been a lightning rod in this country because of her use of religion to discriminate against a segment of people in this country, right? And it goes into the whole thing that we've been talking about for a long time when it comes to the division between church and state. Excuse me. The separation between church and state, where just because you ascribe to a certain belief in your government position, you aren't supposed to use your position to forward your religious beliefs on others who may not necessarily practice the same things that you do. So yeah, Kim Davis thinks that meeting the Pope was a validation of everything that she's done. Kim Davis thinks that the fact that Mike Huckabee coming to meet her after she was released from jail was a validation of what she's done. Kim Davis thinks that rally of all those people cheering her on for discriminating against a marginalized group of people, namely gay and lesbian couples, she thinks that's a validation. She thinks all of these things are validations of what she's done. So to a large degree, it's just furthering her sense of conviction to be so wrong, right? To be so wrong to legitimately, or in her mind, legitimately discriminate against others and use her position to do so. It'll be interesting to see when it comes up for re-election in Kentucky whether or not Kim Davis is re-elected there, especially considering all the news coverage that she's gotten. It'll be very interesting to see what's going to happen in Kentucky, in that county, and whether or not they re-elect Kim Davis or they put someone else in that position, because that's right now the only way that she can be removed is to be voted out. So that's where the political process comes into play, and people have to go to the polls and find out whether or not this is something that they're willing to live with, whether or not you want your government officials discriminated against other people on behalf of you, because our government officials represent us, right? They represent us. So yeah, man, that was some real interesting thing, man. That was just, the Pope meeting up with, what some would consider a known bigot here in America. So yeah, man. Yeah, that happened. And another thing happened, and this is I made mention of this couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose had been accused of sexually assaulting or gang raping a young woman, along with 2 other people, right? And I spoke because, of course, again, I am a Bulls fan, right? I'm from Chicago and everything. Like, I've always been a Bulls fan and everything else. I like Derrick Rose as a player. He hasn't necessarily, he hasn't been able to stay on the floor, right? But one of the things, when I think about, the fact that Derrick Rose had been accused of a gang rape, one of the things I thought was to try to withhold judgment, right? And the reason that I wanted to withhold judgment is because for one, you don't want Derrick Rose in the same way that you wouldn't want a Bill Cosby to be guilty of the things that people are accusing him of doing. You don't want that. You see this person doing great things and you don't want them to be brought down by doing something extremely dumb, right? But at the same time, I didn't put any sort of defense up for Derrick Rose because we've seen far too often where people or men in power or men of wealth, men of means are able to use that wealth, power, and means to kind of shut down the allegations against them, whether they be true or not, right? So I withhold judgment on whether or not Derrick Rose is guilty of the things that this lady accuses him of saying, right? And I remember before, when these allegations first came to light, one of the first things I said was, I had a few friends who were worried about this woman's name. They wanted to know this woman's name, and it's like, well, why do you really need to know her name? Her name is not being promoted for her own protection from people like you, right? And there were a lot of guys who off the top were saying that this woman was lying simply because it was Derrick Rose and they didn't want to believe it, right? And so earlier this week, I asked the question of whether or not, but after Derrick Rose had given his account, Derrick Rose had given his account of the alleged incident. I wanted to know, how many dudes just like, you know what, I believe Derrick Rose because of what he said. I believe Derrick Rose right now. And one of the things that came up was the fact that, well, she went out for coffee the next day and she went to civil court instead of, trying to get him thrown in jail and whatever else, right? And it's one of those things to where if it happens to somebody that you might not necessarily be so willing to just take this man's word for it, right? And that's one of the things I was really trying to get some of my brothers to understand was like, okay, you have daughters. I know a couple of these guys, you have daughters. If this same thing had happened to your daughter, would you still be holding this sort of, would you still be willing to exercise this level of restraint when it comes to, or better yet, not even exercising a level of restraint? Would you be so willing to believe him if it was your daughter, right? Would it be your daughter's fault that happened? Would you be questioning whether or not your daughter go to the legal, go to criminal court or what have you? Do you understand how hard it is for women to come forward against men of means, power, and influence? Do you understand how hard it is for them? Do you understand that less than 2% of rape allegations come back to be proven false? Less than 2%. And I talked about that with Bill Cosby as well, when there are over 40 accounts of Bill Cosby allegedly raping or drugging women to have sex with them, over 40 accounts. And at a 2% clip, Bill Cosby is guilty of quite a few, even if not all of them. He's guilty of quite a few, right? And yet we have this knee-jerk reaction to not believing these women, to not necessarily taking these women's allegations seriously. Why? Because to a large degree, and I don't want to make really sweeping statements about this, but there are a segment of dudes who are guilty of some of the same things that, say, for instance, a Bill Cosby or Derrick Rose may have been guilty of, and they don't want to see themselves as being rapist, right? You don't want to think that the thing that you did to this woman was rape. You don't want to think that something that you did with this woman was really screwed up and she didn't necessarily have the power or the means to reject you in the way that some people would find acceptable, right? So I think a lot of the defense of people like or of Derrick Rose, and I'm not saying that Derrick Rose did it. I hope he didn't do it, but I'm not going to put it past anybody, or I'm definitely not going to put it past him that he did do it, right? But the defense of instances of rape when it comes to men of power and men of means, I think the defense of it is like a knee-jerk reaction from a lot of guys because they have done some of these things and they just simply don't want to see themselves as being guilty of possibly raping somebody, right? Nobody wants to know that about themselves. Nobody wants to own that for themselves. Nobody wants to really absorb that and say, damn, I did that same shit. All it takes is this woman now to make this phone call and I could be in the same position as Derrick Rose. That's how a lot of dudes are thinking, even though like they probably won't be put in that same position, but that's how a lot of dudes are taking this in. So that's where that knee-jerk reaction comes into where like off top, when you hear the fact that Derrick Rose had been accused of rape, off top dudes like, nah, he didn't do it. Or with Bill Cosby, nah, he didn't do it. Even though Bill Cosby admits to being with these people, even though even Derrick Rose, he admitted to the fact that he had been with this woman. He admitted to the extracurricular activities. He said that this woman submitted to these extracurricular activities with his boys and everything else. That's another thing too, man. Like, I don't know. At 25, 26, man, making millions of dollars, are you really trying to put that in jeopardy the way you just like, you know what, I'm gonna have sex with this girl and my boys? Like, I'm to me, I'm more so like, I'm upset, like, are you really just fucking stupid, right? But at the end of the day, when it comes to Derrick Rose and the rape allegations, man, like I've said before, I hope that these allegations are not true, right? But I am not of the mindset that these things could not have happened. And I think for a large degree, when we talk about rape, when we talk about rape culture, when we talk about men's attitudes towards women, there is going to have to be some sort of shift in the minds of men, so where when a woman accuses a celebrity or a dude of rape, to not necessarily just on the defensive take up for this dude, right? Or take this dude's account as the end all be all. It's very hard for a woman to come forward with an allegation of rape, especially against someone of means like a Derrick Rose, like a Bill Cosby, right? Very hard, because one of the reasons why everybody is sort of like, again, I had a friend that was asking about this woman's name. One of the reasons why a lot of these women don't come forward is because they begin to be the ones on trial, right? What were you wearing? Why were you there at that time? Why haven't you said anything beforehand? This person is making millions of dollars and he can have any woman he wants. Why would he have to take it from you? And the trial becomes about them, not so much about the actions that happen against them. And that's part of the reason why so many women don't come forward when people think they really should. And sometimes the women blame themselves, right? Because again, we always talk about how, you shouldn't have been wearing that. Why was I at this dude's house at this time at this, at night? Maybe I shouldn't have like batted my eyes this time. Or maybe I should have done this. So women start beating themselves up for the things that have happened to them. So this idea that women, or really not even so much the idea of women, but the idea that these men of means aren't capable of rape simply because they have the means to be pretty much with anybody they want to. But just the idea that these men aren't going to do this because they have that option. I think a lot of dudes need to kind of get over that. And think about, not only just these women that you don't know, because I think a lot of that has something to do with it too. These women that you don't know, who you don't have any vested interest in, who you don't have any emotions attached to. Think about if your mother was in the same situation, if your sister was in that same situation, if your daughter, your aunt, or your cousin was in that same situation, what your reaction would be. And a large degree of dudes, most dudes would say, I'm ready to kill this motherfucker. Well, if you're ready to do that for a dude who's done this to someone in your family, then take a pause whenever you hear a story of a dude of means, a dude of power, a dude of influence, a dude of notoriety. Take a pause and sit back and wonder, like, is this motherfucker capable of doing it? And I'm going to sit back and take in all this information. I'm going to take in all of this evidence before I just up and say, nah, he didn't do it. Especially for a nigga you don't know. I mean, as much as, we see these guys in social media, as much as we see these guys in on the TV and on movies or whatever else, we don't really know these motherfuckers, man. And that's why I think, where it gets real screwed up, like, dudes is just like caping for other dudes just on the strength of him being a dude. It's like, I don't know you. You probably did do that shit. So, yeah, man. Derrick Rose, again, I hope he didn't do it, man. I hope he didn't, but I remember at one point people were talking about Derrick Rose wasn't even in that town at that particular time. Derrick Rose wasn't playing ball. All of these reasons why Derrick Rose couldn't have done it, and then Derrick Rose puts himself in the room when the alleged rape happens. So, we gotta like kind of take a step back as dudes, man, and just be more mindful of our defenses of some of these cats, man. Because as much as I would like for Derrick Rose to not be guilty of this, I'm at the same time saying it's possible that he very well could have, right? So, yeah, that happened. Derrick Rose spoke on that. He also spoke about his impending free agency that's 2 years away, but I'm going to need this motherfucker to actually stay on the floor for more than 13 games before he starts talking about free agency 2 years away from now, right? Yeah, man. But another more national story kind of happened this week. And it's one of those stories that we are far too familiar with. It's one of those stories that, when you hear it happen, you hate to hear that another instance of this has gone on. And it sucks, man. It sucks. And I'm talking about the shooting that happened in Oregon, the mass shooting that happened where 9 people lost their lives. And I believe, what's this guy's name? Chris Harper Mercer was the shooter this time, right? Chris Harper Mercer, 26-year-old kid, well, not even kid, 26-year-old dude, man, goes to a community college, kills 9 people. I think he injured maybe an additional 13 folks. And one of the things that again, it's one of those things where it's like it's happening far too often, and it goes into the whole, usually when things like this happen, the debate goes into mental health, gun control, the testicular fortitude of those in political positions to enact some forms of reform. And, we talk about the NRA being a lobbying group. We talk about, a lot of folks tend to think that, the solution to batting gun violence is more guns. I've spoken about this issue quite a bit years ago. I think the last time I really spoke to this was after Newtown. And not even after Newtown, I had to speak on it again when it was Javon Belcher. When Javon Belcher killed his wife, or his girlfriend at the time, and himself. And Bob Costas went on the Monday Night Football broadcast and spoke about whether or not, he spoke about gun control to a certain degree. And a lot of folks, got into his shit. As someone who owns guns, who carries a gun daily, who's also an NRA member. I know some of you guys may be surprised at that, but I am also an NRA member. When I hear things like what happened in Oregon, it's fucked up, right? And knowing it's fucked up. And one of the things I always kind of go back into when it comes to like a mass shooting, like we had the one in Shreveport, we had the one in Charleston, we had the one in Newtown, we had the one in Oregon, we had the one in Tucson, we had the one in too many to name. Just too many to name. And the discussion is always surrounded, like we have the right has their talking points. The right will tell you that, you know, if there was only a guy there, if there was, you know, we need to get rid of these gun-free zones. And I can't even lie to you guys. There was a certain point where I thought so too. I understand the need somewhat of a gun-free zone, but I also understand the other end of it, right? Like I'm caught in the middle. I'm caught in the middle because I'm not necessarily one of those gun nut dudes who think that every solution to every problem is to pick up the gun and go handle your business. I'm not one of those dudes, but I'm also not one of those dudes who think that getting rid of all the guns is going to ever be reasonable, is going to ever be realistic or possible. Right? I'm just not one of those dudes. I'm kind of caught in the middle. When I see a story like this one in Oregon, you know, I'm thinking, damn, another one. Why? Right? And damn, man. Okay. When it comes to gun ownership, I think the vast majority of gun owners are responsible human beings who take the ownership of a gun with great responsibility, great care. The vast majority of us, right? I think most gun owners are about gun safety. When you watch a gun video on YouTube, you'll like one of the sticking points of watching the gun video on YouTube is they always talk about making sure that gun is clear. It's unloaded and there's nothing racked in the slide. There's nothing in the chamber. Safety is of paramount importance when you're watching even just YouTube videos about guns. So I think the vast majority of gun people or people who are for the Second Amendment are responsible human beings who take that responsibility with no form of like lackadaisicalness about it, right? If that's even a word, lackadaisicalness. I think I just made that shit up, but the idea of the gun-free zone. I know a lot is made about the idea of the gun-free zone, and when it comes to shooters, like especially like a lot of these mass shootings, you know, the talking point goes that, you know, these shooters go to these gun-free zones because they know that they aren't going to face any resistance, right? But there's nobody else there who's actually following the rules there that have a gun on them. So they go for the path of least resistance. And so these gun-free zones are basically making people sitting ducks, right? And it's a really crass way to look at it. It's a way that I, at one point, looked at it. I'm never really usually at a loss for words, man. But as a gun owner, shit. Okay. Here's how I think. Shit, man, I don't even know. And it's frustrating as hell because, like, this is one of those issues where it's so polarizing and so absolute on both sides. There are people on the left who believe that the only way to get rid of all gun violence is to just get rid of all the guns. Take away all these guns. The only people that should have guns are the police, right? And then you have people on the right who are thinking, no, we need more guns. You know, the more people who are legally armed, the less these things will happen. Well, I live in a city like, I live and work in around the city of Detroit, right? I see local news stories every day where a person who is licensed to carry a concealed firearm has, you know, kept the robber off of them, who shot back at carjackers and prevented their car from being robbed. I've seen videos or news stories just here in Detroit where people have shot at and killed home invaders or kept home invaders from coming into their home. There was a couple stories, not even earlier this year, 2 women within 2 nights who had shot dudes who were trying to rob them or invade their home, right? So as someone who owns a gun, that's one of the reasons why I own a gun, right? I'm all about the personal protection of myself, my family, those around me, right? And I take that responsibility greatly, right? So much so that I pay the monies, I take the classes, I did everything that the government required me to do in order to do that, right? And as a black man in America, I don't have necessarily the faith in the police that a lot of people have. I don't. I don't believe that the police can protect me in a way that I can protect myself in the moment. Now, it's not to say that just because I have a gun that I'm going to be able to just ward off any threats at all. I would like to be able to have a fighting chance, but I don't believe that the gun magically gives me superpowers that I'm able to just do anything, everything. I also operate under the belief that everybody's got a gun, whether or not they say so or not. That's pretty much how I roll throughout society. Like if I'm walking anywhere, I just gotta assume that everybody's backing, right? So when I talk about guns and gun ownership, my gun ownership and how I feel about it is about my personal protection. And I'm not going to even lie to you guys. Sometimes it's fun to shoot. Like I go shooting as a hobby. I go shooting for the sport of it. I go shooting to improve my fucking aim. So if I do have to shoot something, then I'm going to shoot what I'm aiming at. I'm not shooting all over the goddamn place. I saw a guy at I was at the gun range yesterday. Me and my wife. We saw a guy in the booth next to us. He's out there with a Desert Eagle. He's trying to shoot the motherfucker one-handed, and he can't even handle the shit. It's like he's so busy worried about looking cool as opposed to properly handling his weapon and not hitting anything that he's not supposed to, right? But I'm getting sidetracked. When I hear stories about guys shooting up schools, and we have this, there's pretty much almost like the damn, you can almost pinpoint who the guys are who are shooting these schools up. It's usually young, white, loner males, right? Now this guy here was biracial, but the vast majority of the mass shooters that we've seen in this country are young white males, right? Who are just not as, they're socially awkward to a large degree. They don't necessarily have the social connections that a lot of folks have and everything else. And we talk about the mental health aspect of it. Our mental health system has been gutted in this country. We know that. But I feel like I'm fucking rambling, man. 9 people lost their lives in Oregon, and it's a tragic thing. And I simply don't know. I don't know what we ought to do, because I am one of those people. I don't know. Just a second, people. Okay. I simply can't understand why we can't come to some sort of level-headed agreement as to what we are to do with gun ownership in America, right? I am for common sense gun control. I am for background checks. I am for registering your weapon. I am for, what I really am for, and this is probably anathema to a lot of Second Amendment proponents, what I'm really for is a national standard, one national standard for gun ownership and concealed carry in America, right? I'm for that. I think a lot of the confusion when it comes to guns and gun ownership and who's able to have guns and who isn't is the fact that there's so many different state laws that kind of make the process cumbersome, right? Now, I believe that if I was licensed by the federal government to carry a weapon concealed in much the same way that I'm licensed by the state to carry a weapon concealed, that I should be able to do so wherever I go, right? I should be able to do that. But I also think that along with that should come the background check, should come the mental health check, should come a routine level of pistol safety, gun safety training courses, right? Now, we talk about the NRA when it comes to a lot of these gun control laws and everything else, and how like a lot of the gun control laws, or the fact that a lot of new gun regulations haven't been passed because of the NRA's resistance to it. As someone who is an NRA member, I'm not. It's not as if I endorse everything that the NRA does, in much the same way that just because I voted for someone to go to political office that I necessarily agree with everything that they're advocating. One of the reasons why I'm an NRA member is because of the insurance that I get for my guns. Another reason that I'm an NRA member is because of the training materials that get sent to me every month for pistol safety. For not only just pistol safety, but learning different techniques and everything as far as shooting is concerned. Because again, I do shoot for hobby, I do shoot for sport. So I'm in the NRA for reasons like that, right? But I also do get the propaganda in the mail. I get the solicitation for donations to get Obama out of office and fight against the Obama regime. He's trying to take away our guns. I get all of that shit and just throw it in the trash, right? And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who are also NRA members who go ahead and send the NRA money. I mean, the NRA is pretty well funded. They don't necessarily need my money to do that, right? But at the same time, man, like, there are times where I just feel like it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be an owner of a gun when things like these happen. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. I hate that there were 9 people who lost their lives needlessly at the hands of this Chris Harper Mercer. And that there were people who lost their lives in other mass shootings needlessly. I hate that we don't necessarily have the regulations, the common sense regulations that we need. I think a lot more of us, more responsible gun owners, do need to step up, and we do need to vocalize the need for more common sense gun laws. But it's a multi-pronged issue. It's one that requires the need to embrace the nuance of the discussion as opposed to the absolutes on either side. Because a lot of this sits right there in the middle. A lot of people, when it comes to guns and gun control, especially for those of us who own guns, we sit right there in the middle, right? Yeah, I hate it. I hate it. And as a matter of fact, man, I hate that I couldn't even be more articulate about this right now. My mind is everywhere. My mind is with those families who lost lives. I have empathy for the president for being in a position where he really has his hands tied. And one of the things that I said this week, man, and even as a gun owner, and I hate this shit. As someone who owns guns, I think that like gun manufacturers, when they hear a story of a mass shooting happening, that they absolutely love this shit. That they absolutely love it. And I think they love it for the sense of this. Here's what typically happens when we have a mass shooting in America. We'll have to call for more gun control. This happened right after Newtown too. We'll have to call for more gun control. And when we have the call for more gun control, we'll have a bunch of celebrities. They'll make a public service announcement. They'll make a really splashy commercial, and they'll talk about all the things that we need to do. We need to say no more, right? They'll do all of that, and we'll have politicians who get on TV and they'll say our hopes and our prayers are with those who lost their lives in X, Y, Z tragedy, and they'll talk about we're going to do X, Y, and Z for more common sense gun legislation. Right? And while that's going on, you got a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who are believing that there's going to be a big gun ban. Right? They got this gun ban that's coming. And I need to get everything that I can get right now before this ban comes. And so when they do that, they buy up everything. They go to the gun store, they go to Walmart. Walmart has a 3-box minimum or a 3-box limit as to how much you can buy. So they'll get to the Walmart as early as they possibly can and buy up all the 3 boxes. They'll send a buddy in, go buy another 3 boxes, and they'll hoard a lot of these. They'll hoard a lot of the ammo. They'll go buy a lot of guns, right? I need to get this gun before this ban comes. I need to get this one before this ban comes, right? And the supply dries up. And with the supply drying up, when those guns do come out, their value is a whole lot higher. So an AR-15 that would normally go for $600 will now sell for $2,200. I know because I bought one. Right? That will happen. And who benefits when that happens? But the gun manufacturers. That's who benefits when things like this happens. So when a mass shooting happens and, 10, 11, 12, 13, 20 Americans lose their lives at the hands of some deranged motherfucker who got his hands on, that's another thing too. Some of these guns are being procured by illegal means. But, when these things happen, these gun manufacturers stand to benefit. And I know they love this shit. And it's sick and it's twisted. That's exactly what happens. We've seen this movie before. Where we'll call for more common sense gun laws. Everybody's attention is on that. And then after a while, everybody's attention kind of fades. Their gusto in getting these guns off the streets or applying more common sense gun laws, their gusto in that just kind of goes away. They lose interest. They put their hands up. I don't know what the fuck to do. And it's right back to the status quo. So I do believe that we do need to have a national standard. I do believe that, sometimes states' rights can be a bit overblown. I do believe that we need to have a national standard for gun ownership, for concealed carry, for open carry, for those who are, about the business of advertising or, bringing attention to themselves, which is how I view open carry. I just think you bring a lot more attention to yourself than that's needed. But you just hate to hear that 9 people lost their lives for no fucking reason at all, other than somebody who was maladjusted, feeling that the only way that he can get some form of notoriety and attention was to go take the lives of other people. So, yeah, man. Not the greatest Spann Report. Not the greatest Spann Report. But right now, it just kind of is what it is, man. It really is. And I apologize to you guys. I really do. But yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one here up. I'm gonna wrap this up because I'm just like I don't know what to say to it. As much as I thought I had to say to this, my mind is all over the place. It really is. But again, my prayers are with the families of those who lost their lives in Oregon. It's just senseless, man. I don't know. But before I get out of here, I gotta let you guys know how you can get in touch with me here at the Spann Report. Let your voice be heard. You can hit me up at the hotline, area code 313-288-0485. That's area code 313-288-0485. Leave me those voicemail messages. I'll play those messages on the show, and I'll reply to those messages on the show here as well. You can email the show here at feedback@thespannreport.com. That's feedback@thespannreport.com. Leave me those emails, and I'll read those emails and reply to those here on the show. Chop it up with me on Twitter and Instagram. My name on both of those platforms is Mr._Spann. Go ahead and like the Mr. Spann fan page on Facebook as well. But chop it up with me throughout the week. Go ahead and like or follow me on Twitter and Instagram. My name is Mr._Spann. Also, leave me a review on iTunes and or Stitcher Radio. 5 stars preferably. I'll read those 5-star reviews here on the show. And I will thank you here on the show. And it helps the show grow, and I would very much appreciate if you guys went about the business of doing that. And for all of you the Spann Report needs, go to thespannreport.com, www.thespannreport.com. Every video is available there on thespannreport.com. And as a matter of fact, on this episode, there is a poll, okay? I do want to know, who do you guys think is most responsible for mass shootings in America? Whether that be lax state gun laws, mental health, the president, the NRA, and I left you an option to put in who you think or what you think is most responsible for most of the mass shootings here in America. So go ahead to thespannreport.com. Go on this episode of thespannreport.com. It's in the podcast episode section, and vote in the poll. Let me guys know what you think or who you think is most responsible for the mass shootings here in America. But yeah, man, I'm about to get out of here. Yeah, I gotta. Sorry, babe. But yeah, I gotta get out of here. So until next time, fam. Peace.